Writer and craftivist Betsy Greer is on the podcast today. And before we get to that interview, I want to tell you about one particular project that derailed my whole creative life since the last time you heard from me on the podcast. I made my very first project out of yarn I spun myself. I've been slowly teaching myself how to spin yarn over like the last decade or more. And a few weeks ago, I spun a bunch of wool up into yarn and I was like, this is usable. And I dropped everything that I was working on to wind up that yarn. I didn't even wash it. I didn't set the yarn. Like normally you sort of do the same thing to yarn that you do to a finished project. You kind of block it. And I didn't even do that. I was so eager and like desperate to cast on something with this yarn. And I was like, obviously the only thing that I could possibly make that would make any sense at all is a simple hat. And so it's just a plain old stockinette hat with a ribbed edging, and I made it to fit my son. And it was so incredibly satisfying to get that hat off of my needles and have it be exactly the right size for my son. And he was like, hey, it fits. Can I have it? And I was like, yes, you can. Mr. usually just grumps around about, whatever. So it was like a full, it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, this project. It like, I had to drop everything. It was I talk sometimes about craft as exorcism, and that's exactly what this was. I had to exercise this like burning need to make something out of this handspun yarn, and I still find it so deeply satisfying. I'm almost done with a second hat from the same yarn. My husband will refuse to wear such a hat, so my kid and I will have matching handspun hats next year, and I'm just so excited about it. And I still haven't gotten back into the groove of the projects I set aside when I had to start on these hats, because I don't know what it is. It was like the thought of going back to my Sophie's Universe crochet blanket where every round is memorizable, but it's a different stitch pattern than the round before. It's like my brain can't shift back into that gear yet. And I keep looking longingly at that blanket saying, oh, I want to get back to it. But at the same time, when the evening comes around and I'm in my pajamas and it's usually the time that I would have been working on that blanket several weeks ago, my brain's like, nope, not going to do it. So I'm now like in between projects. It's weird how it's like I have a hangover from the compulsive making, and I am like just haven't been making enough at all. I don't know. Do you get that way when you finish a really exciting, really compelling project, and then you're like, what do I do next? Because you're like, I don't even know. Tell me, email me, and tell me if I'm alone in this and I'm totally weird, or if you get that way too. Today on the show, I'm talking with Betsy Greer. She popularized the term craftivism over a decade ago. She's written a book of the same name. And I had the distinct pleasure of going on a book tour with her back in 2014 when Make It Mighty Ugly had come out around the time that craftivism did. We were joined on that tour by fellow author Leanne Prain. And I was excited to talk to Betsy at this particular point in time because I have been thinking about craftivism far more than I used to. I used to be an appreciator of craftivism. I used to enjoy reading about what other people were doing in an activist way with their craft. But since the Women's March in January, I have been participating in craftivism myself. I've participated in my first yarn bombing, and I've been writing every week in the Action and Craft newsletter about the state of the world and how we might be able to do something to make it better through craft or art. And I've been writing about groups and individuals who've been doing the same. And so it was a no-brainer to invite Betsy on the show. And then, of course, I was like, you know what, though? Betsy always talks about craftivism. I want to talk to her about her very personal experience with craft. And our conversation went in directions I really wasn't anticipating. Here goes.
These days, I am making stitched affirmations for my project, You Are So Very Beautiful. It started when I was doing this app called the 5 Minute Journal. And it asks you every morning, it says, like, um, what three things are you grateful for? What three great things are you going to do today? And to have an affirmation. And I found that every morning I hated coming up with an affirmation, and it was really hard for me, like ridiculously hard. When I lived in DC, I would like be on public transportation, and just like I would always find myself looking out the window, like watching people. I would just totally just turn off when I had to um, come up with one single affirmation. And after a while of doing this, I thought about what if I stitched affirmations for myself and then left them for other people to find. And I've been doing it for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half. And the response has been really good. But it's also something that I very much do for me as well. If I need courage, then I will make something that says you are strong. If I need to be reminded that I am amazing or whatever, and it seems kind of silly probably, but I like making something that shores me up, and then giving it out for someone and hoping that it shores them up as well.
What's different about what's different about it in hoping that it shores someone else up that kind of got in the way of you doing it when it was only for yourself? Do you know what I mean? Like, right, you had such a hard time doing it when it was only for you, but now it's become such a habit that you do all the time and share with someone else, even though it's also for you. Like, what's the
Right.
what's the crux of that?
Well, I think that's one of those things where when you're stitching signs, it takes like the actual lettering takes maybe like 15, 20 minutes. I do a border generally, which takes longer. So they take me around an hour when I add the border. And I just was like, okay, I have this thing and it's in an hour and I want to make more than them. So I just kind of had this like horrible montage in my head of having like 50 signs all to myself, and it was kind of weird. So what was I going to do with them? Just like put them on the wall. So and I thought, okay, well, Sarah Lothian, who lives in Melbourne, does a practice called Guerrilla Kindness, and where she leaves things out for people to find. And she got that idea from, I think it was a toy society in Melbourne that left toys out. And for the longest time, I heard about this thing that she was doing and thought it was so great, but never could put it together with my own work. And then when I thought about making these signs for myself, it was like, oh, boom, I can like make them and give them away. Because you start realizing that in the process of making these signs that you're not alone in it, and that even though it feels really alone, and and you feel like, oh, I'm the only one that feels that way. You never are.
Woo!
Yeah, I know. The dog is getting very excited. And you never are alone. And I think it's important to remember that, because because how many times a day do we think, oh, that's weird, oh, that's stupid, oh, that is whatever, and when in reality, tons of other people are feeling the exact same way, and so we alienate ourselves when we shouldn't. So this was a way to kind of think about how I wasn't alone.
And it's a way of having faith too, isn't it? Because it's not like you're handing it to someone who looks lonely and saying, "Here, you're not alone." It's you're just sort of letting it out in the world, knowing for sure that somebody is feeling the same way you are, even though you don't
Right.
know who they are or have any indication of how they're actually feeling.
Yeah, I thought at least like there would be some teen girl somewhere that would be like, oh man, I I don't feel, pretty, or I don't feel whatever, because I know that when I was a teen, I mean, come on, I'm 41 and I was having a hard time coming up with one word. So yeah, I think that it was a way of kind of deconstructing this idea of being alone. And
Do you spend an hour every day making one of these?
definitely not, but it does, if I want to be lazy and just, I don't know, watch some TV, it definitely gives me kind of like, but I'm making something, so that counts, right? It counts as being productive. Because I find that, after working full time, and then I get home, and you walk the dog and you make dinner, and I'm tired. So sometimes I need that kind of break of just, I've been watching a lot of Grace and Frankie lately. So and before I kind of work more at night. So yeah, so not every day, but several days a week. And I actually maybe doing some larger scale signs other than just the palm size ones.
Oh, yeah?
So that will be interesting when I start making those. We'll see how long those will take.
Yeah. What are you going to do with them?
Um, well, I'm kind of nervous because they're going to be big. Like they're going to be like 1 foot by 3 feet probably. So I'm going to have to like affix them to something. And I've never done that. And all my years of doing stuff, I've never, um, so, but I'm going to do it and hopefully not get arrested, but I don't know why.
Oh,
I
so
would get arrested. But I'm so law abiding that there is definitely this fear in me that's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. But I mean, if I get arrested for putting something that says you are so very beautiful out in the world, there is a definite problem in the world.
so you're doing it like a bit of a guerrilla art. You're going to put the sign on something?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe like a fence.
That's
And
amazing.
but it's kind of funny when you are doing a project, and I don't know, I know that you do lots of different things, but I tend to have one project and stick with it for like 10 years. So I was, and so I did that my word projects for like off and on for a decade.
Hmm.
And so I'm only a year and a half in, and so you think about like, okay, I'm making tiny signs. What else can I do with this? And of course, the natural thing is make bigger signs, right?
And are you cross
So
stitching them or embroidering them or both?
they're gonna be. It's just like a back stitch.
Hmm.
I guess it's a back stitch. So right now it's just with embroidery floss. So I guess I don't really know where backstitch lies in the whole like cross stitch embroidery kind of continuum, but that's how I'm making them.
It's my favorite. I remember learning how to do it in home ec class in grade 7, and it was the first thing in all of home ec class I was good at.
Yeah, see, I really like it because it looks neat
Hmm.
no matter almost no matter what you do. You can definitely mess it up, which I have many times before, but it compared to like freehand embroidery, which has so if you don't use like a transfer or something, it can go wrong really easily. Cross stitch is so kind of like, it's everything is squared off and there's so many right angles and that it looks neat
Hmm.
without a lot of effort, which is why I like it and why I used to like doing things like just knitting rows of lots of different colors and not doing a lot of difficult stuff when I kind of needed something that was meditative and something that I needed to kind of shut down at the end of the day and just do something. And I found now I've been stitching stuff for so long that if I don't stitch for like maybe a week or something, I get cranky.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And one of the things, like I knew that like if I didn't get exercise for like a week, I would get pretty cranky. But like the whole stitching thing, I'm like, whoa. Well, so that was pretty interesting find because all of a sudden, I'm is like inexplicably cranky, and then I pick up something and stitch, and then I'm like, I'm in such a better mood. This is
What?
amazing.
So which aspect, like what is it about the stitching that immediately improves your mood? Is it the physical act, or is it the emotional act, or the sharing?
I think it's everything. I think it's making something into being that isn't word related. I mean, I stitch words, so it is technically word related, but like writing is constantly filling that blank canvas with words and figuring out which word is the best. And I just do one stitch over and over and over again. So I don't have to think about it. So it's this repetitive nature where I'm creating something.
Hmm.
And I like that kind of aspect of being able to make something. And when I was like stitching, years ago and like super depressed, that was really important to me to know that I'm making something. I'm not just like sitting around or whatever and being sad, which there's a time and a place to do that. But it was like I'm actively creating something and I could see it lengthen in my own hands. And I can see where I did something basically, when you're knitting, it's basically just two sticks and strings. So it's out of nothing. And you're making this thing happen. And I think it's that sense of agency that craft gives you that I think is often overlooked a lot of times.
There's a capability in it. I am creating something.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, that happens all across the board. We all create stuff all the time because we have to eat. and we have to, write email and stuff like that. But I think that we don't always think of that as creating, if that makes sense. And I think we should kind of backstep a bit and be like, huh, I am more creative than I thought.
Yeah, then we give ourselves credit for.
Right.
I like how it made me think of finding silence, like what you said about writing, right? Because you write professionally, you've written books, and you write. You told me about this wicked article that you're writing this week, for the local paper, and so you work a lot in words, and there's noise in that. There's noise in your head because as you're writing, I don't know, maybe this is only me, but I know that as I write, I am, like you said, searching for the right word and making sure that the turn of phrase I'm choosing is effective in the way I want it to be. And so even while there's this linearity coming out of my fingers as I write sentence after sentence and they, kind of string together, in my mind, there's a lot of noise around
Yeah.
that linearity about, like, could I take this path or that path and this word and that word? And it sounds like what you're finding, even though you're stitching words, it's the repetitiveness and silence of not looking for those other paths and just relaxing into the simplicity of what it is that you're doing. And
Right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind
Oh,
of, it
sorry.
sounds beautiful to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the article that you're talking about is a profile from my local paper on this guy who goes by the name of the Noble Woodsman, and he used to be a pro wrestler, and then he was a photographer, and now he makes things like beard oil and axes. And so I was trying to distill all of this awesome stuff in a 500 word profile this week. And it was kind of hard to fit all this amazing backstory and about what he's doing today into this one piece. And there is that noise and this kind of like, am I using the right word? And I don't know about you, but when I'm writing something, there's a rhythm to it.
Mm-hmm.
It will either feel right or it will feel wrong. And I guess it's probably that whole idea of the flow state of where the rhythm and I know it's working and I know it's right, and I've never had that about anything else in my life, and it feels really good when that happens. And so maybe one day I'll get there with stitching, but so it's nice to kind of find a rhythm with my writing, have that, and that's kind of checks one box, and then go and pull out my stitching, and that checks another box.
Which
So
box is it? So that I'm really interested that's I feel the same way, and I almost feel like I didn't realize it until you said it, and I almost feel like maybe I didn't realize it because I feel like it might be some kind of dirty secret I needed to keep from myself, that I don't often get into that kind of flow state when I'm making something with my hands, but I do all the time when I'm writing.
right.
Did you just admit the same thing?
I
Did I hear you
did.
right?
I did. And it doesn't and like but what's interesting to me about it now that I think about it is that, ooh, this is pretty cool. So I don't know about you, but when I write visually, nothing really happens. Do you know what I mean? I don't read what I write and go, ooh, that sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just an emotional sense of I'm in the right space, I'm doing the right thing, this feels good, this is going where I want. Whereas with stitching, it's a visual type thing. I don't feel it emotionally necessarily, unless it's that kind of release that you feel in like meditation and repetitiveness and kind of relaxing. There's that. But visually, I feel that it's right. So it's like almost a different part of me that kind of fires up.
Do you get that when you're not doing simple repetitive things, if you're doing something more complicated, or is it a factor of that sort of physical repetition?
And I think it's just this whole idea of making something that you like, choosing to make something
Mm-hmm.
and then making it, because like you had this blank piece of cloth or this blank canvas or whatever, and then you do something, and maybe it's probably has something to do with the fact that I'm at the point now where a lot of the stuff that I do comes out the way I want it to,
Mm-hmm.
and so visually it's pleasing to me, and that doesn't mean that, I mean, sometimes I try new stuff and it's horrible.
Right.
But it eventually gets to a place where visually it looks nice, and so I guess it's soothing in a visual way,
Yeah.
and in a
Yeah.
way that writing isn't.
you've put in the time and the effort to develop the skill to be able to execute what you want.
Right. I also do really simple things, so that may have a lot to do with it.
Yeah. No, I do too. It's what was so profound. Like, I feel like I have this dirty secret. Like, my favorite things to make are, like ripple crochet blankets, where it's, just like, there's just a rhythm. It's simple stitches. It's the same stitch over and over and over again, different colors, whatever. I don't have to think about it. But I still find that I don't, I don't hit that same flow state. And like it's really interesting to me that I think I felt ashamed about that until I said it out loud, because like makers are supposed to feel that at some or whatever, but I don't, but I know what I'm missing because I do feel it when I write. And I think I feel it very similarly to the way you described. I can feel that it's right. I can tell that it's right. When I get to the end of what I'm writing, when I'm in that state, I don't feel the need to reread it, or I will just to make sure, I don't have typos or whatever, but I don't often go back and edit or change anything when I've done that, because it's true to what it was, right?
Does it also sound, how does it sound to you? It also, so I'm sorry, I'm going further into this.
No, I love this.
When I write, it sounds right to me if I read it in my head, and it feels right emotionally.
Yes.
And then when I stitch, it looks right, and then it feels right physically.
Mm-hmm. Is it the same physical feeling?
Sorry, I should not. That totally negates everything I said. But what I meant by physically was tactile, in a tactile way.
Oh, I see. So it's not the same emotional feeling. It's
no, it's a totally different thing, because it's tactile, and so it's soothing in a tactile way, but not an emotional way.
That is exactly how I feel about it. There's a feeling that I get like in my chest when I'm writing what I need to be writing in that moment, and I write it out as far as I can, right? It is definitely that flow state, right? Like, and it is it's a gut feeling that is totally emotional, entirely instinctual. It has nothing to do with grammar or structure or any of the things that you learn. It just comes from that place of, and I feel it comes from a place of having developed the skill to write what I need to be writing in that moment, right? That there's a confidence in having something at the end that matches what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And I think you're right. Like, when I'm making something with my hands, there are, even just going back to that ripple blanket example, I will know there's a comfort in the confidence I have that my fingers are doing what they need to be doing and in the right place. And that feels good. It's almost like a clicking, which is more of a tactile sensation than an emotional one, right? There is that, the rhythm comes out as a beat more, and where I'm writing it comes out as it's like an overall feeling.
And I gotta say that, like, if anybody is listening and they're like, I don't feel that way at all. Two things. I don't think I haven't always felt like I hit that flow state with writing. And also, I didn't start paying attention to how it sounded until I wrote a lot of poetry. So now it sounds right, and there's a cadence. And I know that I'm not doing a good job if there's no cadence to it. And so, and with making, it's if you don't feel that way, I guess the most important thing that I want to, I guess, share is that to pay attention to how you feel. Like, where you were talking about how you get that feeling in your chest, like, pay attention to how you feel in your body and how you feel emotionally. And because I don't know about you, but when I've had hard times and I've come back to writing, or I've come back to stitching, I can get back into that state easily, and it's almost like a form of release. And so it calms me down. Both of those things calm me down immensely if I'm really stressed out, because my body is so used to turning to them, and my mind too. So they've become things of comfort.
Yeah, it's true. I feel that way about garter stitch. in a way
Yes.
that I don't about crochet, which is really interesting. But garter stitch is the thing that I come back to over and over when I need comfort. And it's a different kind of comfort than I get if I like write cathartically.
Right.
And that's totally different. And talking about this, like I realized that, you know, I'm increasingly concerned in this conversation that it seems like I imagine for both of us, like maybe we're saying that craft isn't as important, but I don't think that it's that at all. And I'm realizing that though, you know, that writing in a very creative way, in an expressive way, plays a particular role in my life, that craft doesn't play that same role. But part of what I love so much about making things is the thrill of not knowing what I'm doing. It's why I love trying things that I don't know how to do. It's because there's that, like, I feel capable when I get to the other side and what I've made is half recognizable as what I intended to make. And it's a
Right.
different kind of satisfaction, and it's a different kind of emotional need that I'm fulfilling, because what I'm doing is fulfilling the need to challenge myself. And that's a very different need than the need to comfort myself.
Yeah, they're both
Um,
equally important. I mean, I think the thing is that I always talk, I mean, I talk a lot about how craft kind of saved me because I was
mhm,
so destructive when I started and I was in 25. And with some various things in my kind of background, and you kind of you can shut down really easily. So
mhm,
I had kind of lost the capability to physically feel anything. So so for me, picking up knitting, I just would go into knitting stores, and I know people go, "Oh, this feels really nice," but to me, it was like, "Oh my God, I can feel this. I feel and feeling it in my hands and feeling it was so important and so cathartic to me."
yeah.
And I think that obviously, hopefully, most people won't have that experience in kind of such a deep way, but I think you can have it in different ways where we all kind of get comfort from the tactile part, and and it can be really amazing to and I know that just when I started stitching and writing at the same time, then my life just kind of opened up and everything kind of clicked together because I was missing a piece, and that piece was craft. And without it, um, I was a total mess. And then things started getting a lot better when I found it.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect place to end, like both in terms of like profound statement and in terms of the time that we have. Like
Yeah,
this went in places I had absolutely no idea it would go.
I know, right?
I feel like I have so much to think about now. Just a bit of a meta podcast note. I apologize for this episode coming a lot later than I wanted it to. I kind of resurrected the podcast in April, promising an episode every month. And then at the very end of April, there was a death in my family, and the travel related to that, in addition to the grieving after losing someone I love, set everything in my whole work life back quite considerably. And the podcast is the last thing to be coming back online after I caught up with paid work and client work and other deadline work ahead of time. And so it got me thinking about the podcast and some feedback that you listeners have given me over the months, which is that you're interested in hearing what I'm making and what I'm working on, and things like that. And so I'm going to start to toss in some episodes of the show that are not interview based. That will enable me to be far more consistent with my production schedule, because I won't be working with somebody else's scheduling constraints. And also, a podcast that's just me talking is a lot more straightforward to edit. So look for the next episode of the show to be just me. If there's anything you want me to address or talk about, or burning questions you want me to answer, let me know. Shoot me an email at kimworker.com. Drop me a comment on this episode, or you can find me on social media anywhere you'd like, and let me know what you want me to talk about. Let me know if there's something you're curious about that you want me to address, if there's something you want me to research and talk about. I would love to hear from you, and I'm excited to kind of toss things up a bit with the podcast moving forward, mostly because I'm really excited to get it into regular production, and I hope you're excited too. Thanks for being here. Compulsory exists because of the support of my patrons on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/kpworker for exclusive podcast clips, glimpses behind the scenes into other work that I'm doing, and special projects that I only do with my patrons.